Lesson 66 and 67 from Learn Violin Fast, Book 2. Retakes an upbow exercise and separated slurs and hooked bowing. So we're taking really easy notes on the D string, and we're now introducing much more challenging bow techniques. So the idea is that if we practice these bow techniques on easy music, when we have these techniques in more challenging songs and pieces, we're ready and we already have those skills. So number 66, you have to really keep an eye is that there are some down and ups with rest, and then there's down downs. And then there's very tricky on purpose. You really have to think what your bow has to do. Remember that the down bow sign is a little square without the bottom, or a little hat. Up bow sign is a V. Sometimes you're going to have slurs in the music that you have to figure out what is the bow direction and what should the bow do. And sometimes you're going to have just bow and markings, and sometimes you'll have both. So you have to sometimes kind of decipher what you see and what your bow has to do. If you see nothing, the downbeat gets a down bow, and every note gets a brand new bow. So that's kind of our default. If nothing is on the page as far as slurs or down or up bows, whatever the first note is, whatever the first downbeat is, should be down bow, and then should just come as it comes. So number 66, retakes and up bows, and you really have to pay attention to what the bow needs to do and be very purposeful with it. Sometimes you have to leave the bow down, sometimes you have to do a lift. So you really gotta know what has to happen. Number 66, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that was pretty tricky. I hope you're able to do all of those exercises as far as the downs and the ups. Important information. Separated slurs mean you have to stop the bow and continue in the same bow direction. Hooked bowing typically involves a short note that is hooked to a long note, right? Or so long note and then a short note hooked. And just a gentle reminder that when we separate the bow or when we play staccato and we see dots below or above, it does not mean short and it does not mean rough. You can stop the bow gently and you can start the bow gently. So always play musically, always play what sounds good. Don't just blindly follow what's on the page. Make sure you think, well, is this musical? Is this something that I would enjoy actually listening to? Now, yes, these are exercises, so they're not going to be the most musical, beautiful things, but they are there to help us practice all of these techniques. You'll notice that for number 67, separated slurs and hook bowing, the rhythm is a little crazy. And I fully understand, but the idea is just to practice going from quarter notes to eighth notes, then 16ths, dotted eighth notes with 16ths, and then hooked bowing with that same rhythm. So we're going to fly bow. So we're going to take this a little bit on the slower side, because if we look ahead, we have some pretty fast notes with hook bowing. So yum, bum, 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 bum. When you have to figure out a tempo, how fast you're going to play, usually the best way to do that is find the hardest or the fastest notes. Think how fast you can play those comfortably, and that's going to set your tempo. So because when it's easy, you can go faster, but one of the worst things that you can do is go fast when it's easy, go slow when it's hard. Steady beat is really, really important. So if you go back to the very, very beginning of our journey, we were stepping and we were keeping a steady beat. Same thing applies here. So now that the music is a lot more challenging, make sure you're thinking about what is the fastest, the hardest part that you can play, and that will set your tempo. So I'm looking at the hook bowing at the end. It's probably going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you notice how in the second line of number 67, you went from eighth notes to quarters, then to sixteenths? So that was there on purpose to trick you, and it's very difficult to do. You go from T, 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 ta, 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 and then to very quick ticka, 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 ticka. One more thing I'd like to bring your attention to is the last note. Before the last measure, we had pretty much quarter notes and then shorter notes. So for a while, we played short notes. And when we get to the last measure, because we're so used to playing short notes, very often the most common mistake is we will cut the last note short because we're not counting and because the notes before came were very short. So I was counting in my mind the last note because it's a big change. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. Right? You can't count till 4. You have to also make sure that you count through beat 4 and then you stop gently. So make sure you keep an eye on big changes in rhythms. That is one of the most common mistakes people make is they don't switch and they don't count the long notes long enough. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.